Hi, everyone. This is Jackie Cooper with the Blockchain Legal Institute talk show, and I would like to welcome everyone here for a wonderful show that we're about to explore DAOs and education and so many other topics that are close to my heart. For those that are following us, awesome. And for those that do not know about the Blockchain Legal Institute, let me just share a quick update. We are a centralized library of resources that are available to you for when you want to learn more about building your vocabulary about blockchain, DeFi, artificial intelligence, cryptocurrency, IoT, and so much more. There's a lot going on within our space, both in the compliance side as well as in the development side. And we have summits and a lot of publications and resources so you can do your research. And also just send us questions if you need to find certain things and just don't know where to go, because that's what we're here for. We are the blockchain librarians in many, many ways. So with that, today I have the honor and the privilege to be speaking with someone who actually has been in this industry for quite a while, and he's had multiple careers, and he is very interested in making sure that the next generation of those within our space have knowledge, and that the consumers who are also in this space know where to go and how to have a better quality of life. So welcome today. How are you doing?
Hello, Jacqueline. Thank you so much. I'm doing very well. Happy to be here today.
Yeah, so I'm all about stories and people's background. Why don't you share a little bit more about how you even came to this space? Because I know you're doing so much and people might not realize everything that you're involved with.
So I studied mathematics at university, and then did my master's in mathematics. And the reason I mention this is I was sent the Bitcoin white paper in 2017. And the mathematician inside me kicked out. They solved the Byzantine generals problem. And that was sort of my entrance for my first foray into crypto. I'd heard of Bitcoin before, but it was always in the context of friends buying drugs on the dark web. So it was always as a negative connotation towards Bitcoin because of the application. But once I actually read the white paper, I realized what Bitcoin stood for in terms of it being a technology that allowed peer-to-peer transactions without the need for a third party. And obviously, as of today, it's a store of value or digital gold, depending on which side of the fence that you sit on. But that was my entry into the crypto sphere.
And then what did you do with that knowledge once you kind of started to explore? I know for me, I stepped into it with the purchase of an altcoin. And again, and then I learned about Bitcoin. And I guess I have to say to everyone who's listening, this is, the whole focus of our conversation is not investment advice, not financial advice. It's all education.
Oh, 100%. I mean, once I'd read this was in 2017, probably early to mid 2017, sent the Bitcoin white paper, geeked out, and thought, excellent, let me start to buy some Bitcoin, which I did. And then I discovered there's these things called ICOs where you use Bitcoin or Ethereum, you swap it for another token, and the token would insanely increase in price more often than not. So that's exactly what I did for the rest of 2017 as I started investing in altcoins. Naturally, most of the investments I made were amazing. I became the best trader there was until 2018 when what I round tripped, which basically meant I went back to where I started from. And actually, in my case, I was overexposed to altcoins. I'd forsaken my fundamentals, which was holding more Bitcoin and Ethereum. And my portfolio was down quite heavily. I was down at the worst point, I think 97% on my initial investment. So it's not only that I'd lost all of the profit that I'd made, I was actually down on my initials. And being a mathematician, also being an educator at the time. So the one thing that I do have as well as a master's in education, and I was a high school teacher during 2017. You're taught to reflect as an educator. So that's exactly what I did. I reflected as to why I'd lost this money. And part of it there were naturally scams in the space, people taking advantage of the lack of regulation that exists. But there were also a lack of understanding around what token economics actually means. And that's how a token or a digital currency or an altcoin can accrue value over time. And being a problem solver, that piqued my interest. So from 2018 onwards, I started delving deeper into what do successful token economies look like? What do token economies in general look like? Because back then, outside of maybe Bitcoin's tokenomics and maybe Ethereum's tokenomics, no one had a clue what tokenomics for dApps can look like outside of what maybe layer one blockchains. So that became a hobby, and then it turned into an advisory on the side of me teaching. And then fast forward to 2021, Animoca Brands, so one of the biggest players, if you like, in the space, came knocking. They're like, well, we've seen your profile. You're an educator, you're a mathematician, you've been doing tokenomics for a few years. Let's have a chat. And a chat we did have, and it ended up with me being offered to found their token economics department there. So I waited for the academic year to finish, and then over the summer of 21 transitioned into that role. And that was, if you like, my first full time, or my full transition from Web 2 or traditional work, if you like, or education in this case, into the wacky world of Web 3 and blockchain.
So you use the word tokenomics right now. That has extended into so many different areas. But for those that don't understand what that means, can you kind of give an overview?
Oh, 100%. I mean, in the most simplest term, it's token and economics coming in. So understanding supply and demand of different digital assets and how we can create an economy that scales around it. In reality, it's an onion. I have three young kids, so I'm going to use some Shrekonomics, if you like. It's it's extremely it's complex. It's like an onion. Outside of the fact that it makes you cry, and I'll stop with the dad jokes, or the bad jokes, shall I say? It's there are many different layers to it. And by that, it's you have your initial distribution of these tokens. So in Bitcoin's case, we know that there's 21 million. There will only ever be 21 million Bitcoin.
Yeah.
And with every block that's mined, and it's okay if you don't know what that means, there's a reward to the miner who mines it. And that's a basic token economic system. And why it works in Bitcoin's case is for two reasons. Number one, someone mining a Bitcoin is using up electricity. So there is value there that's being used up. But the other side is there's something called the halving, which is the reward of a Bitcoin block decreases every 4 years, which actually makes it deflationary over time, which is why we've seen value accrual for Bitcoin specifically. Now, that's great for Bitcoin being the godfather of all cryptos, if you like, but within other ecosystems, what we've seen is the rise of governance. And I know we're going to touch on what decentralized governance looks like.
Mm-hmm.
As with any economy, I'm from the UK, every year we have a budget where we talk about what's happening within the economy, what are we changing, what are we fine-tuning. Within a token economy, it's very similar as well, understanding where the supply is, where the demand is, who the different stakeholders are, what the utility of this token is, how it can accrue value over time. And then you can start seeing the onion analogy that we have these different layers to what makes a successful token economy. And I feel we have a few good cases within crypto that we can say have successful token economies, Bitcoin naturally being one, Ethereum being another, and then you can argue maybe Solana and BNB ecosystems have also found some kind of critical mass and product market fit from a successful token economy as well.
So you ended up being in their tokenomics area, and then what happened next?
Oh, I started advising. I came in, we were offering this as a consultancy. So it was working with some of the bigger projects in the space, Sandbox, ApeCoin, Pengu, Open Campus, which we're going to touch into later on, Mochaverse, Pixels, just to name a few. And the beauty of it is that within the crypto space, at least from 21, when I started doing this with Animoca Brands to where we are today, we've seen so much progression in the technology that actually it's been a lot easier, or at least where we are today in December 25, it's a lot easier to build front-end applications that can tap into the technology and we can abstract away the technology, which has been one of the biggest challenges I feel we've had. But the reason I mention that is that for us to have successful tokens that are launching that can have economic frameworks that scale and grow and give not only ownership to those who own these assets, but also a way for them to be able to monetize and help grow and be stakeholders within an ecosystem, it becomes a step closer with critical mass. As with any economy in the real world, we use GDP as a measure, if you like, and we have to understand the flow of money, understanding, are we saving, are we spending, is inflation going up, and so on and so forth. But having that easy front end, if you like, for people to be able to onboard can actually give us a critical mass for us to start seeing tokens really developing into pseudo GDPs. if you like. Whereas before, maybe the technology wasn't there, so adoption became more difficult. And a lot of people in the space, I feel we've hit a saturation point in terms of people coming in for what blockchain enables. For everyone else, it's less about being evangelists of blockchain technology and decentralization, and more so, how can I have a front end application, be it social, be it something that can help with my financial literacy, be it some kind of banking. How can we abstract the technology and just sell a good experience on the front end, that people can adopt, and then in time they can learn about the actual blockchain, the tokens, the digital assets, and so on and so forth, which then feeds this digital GDP, if you like.
So, in expanding any economy, you always have to think about how are you providing the education to the people who are within that economy, because we I don't want to say there's two types of people, because there's not, but there are those that create the businesses, and then those that work within the business. But even those that create the businesses need other individuals who can support the businesses. So there's many different layers. And it all goes back to our educational system, which, you and I have talked about. And globally, there's a lot of different ways that students are taught. And so for the decentralized community, a lot of individuals got into this because of the philosophy of freedom and economic freedom and just personal life freedom. And that comes with, in my opinion, a certain maturity. But now we're seeing it kind of bleeding over into the general population, who really doesn't understand the philosophy of why sometimes this decentralized community was created. And you're involved now with an educational project that is hopefully going to help many kind of step over and understand, and maybe even participate in. So do you want to share more about that?
Absolutely. I mean, so much to unpack. Like, we live in a hyper capitalistic society
Mhm.
as of today, and when you were saying like you can categorize people into two different categories, I actually agree with that in general. I know we're generalizing here, and it's down to how we view money. And for the purposes of this, we can think of it as a rich person and a poor person mindset. And really, the rich person's mindset is, how can I make my money work for me? How can I leverage debt? Again, we live in a capitalistic society which is built on debt. How can I actually have my business running through debt, so I'm not having to pay taxes, so I can actually increase my dividend payments? Versus the layman or the poor person gets into debt to buy materialistic items that actually lose value over time, and are buying items that in reality they cannot afford. And I feel if we're grouping people like that, then it's very clear if someone sits in one category or another category, or maybe there's someone's in transition because they've been red pilled, if you like, they've become financially literate to understand how money works, and actually with inflation, with the way the system and fractional reserve banking is today, and what we saw with the fall of the financial crisis, or the financial crisis in 2008, that actually we don't have ownership of our assets. We don't understand how money works, which then leads into, I think, the next part, which is financial literacy. I have so many friends, or I'm in my late 30s, so I've hired people who have studied many different kinds of degrees, and one thing that was quite shocking to me is, unless you're graduating direct from a finance or business-based degree, and even some of the people who have graduated with business-based degrees don't have financial literacy. I studied mathematics at university at bachelor's degree and at master's degree, and it was only in some of the finance units. It was only in the finance-based units. That's where we learned financial literacy. In all of the other mathematics-based units, zero form of financial literacy, unless it was something maybe statistics related. So even within our education today, people going to higher education can graduate at 21, 22, and not understand how to balance a balance sheet. Now,
Yeah.
for me, there is something very wrong if we have the future leaders of society not having the most basic financial literacy, because we're actually then setting them up to fail within the real world. They're not prepared for the real world. And then sort of migrating that into open campus. Open Campus is an education protocol. Now, what does that mean? I guess to break it down, what we're really trying to build is an education operating system where for any stakeholder within education, they can come in and have the tools needed. In the same way as when Microsoft launched, they had Microsoft Word, they had PowerPoint, they had Paint, they had Excel. It's what are the different applications or the different technologies that we need to really help take education to the 21st century. And I guess when we were off air before we came on air, we spoke about education being one of the oldest institutions that exists, and it's also the institution that's had the least form of innovation or the least amount of innovation historically. And we're at a crux now where we have the rise in AI. We have all of these different research reports being written that blue collar jobs, or a large amount of blue collar jobs, especially at the graduate level, will be wiped out within the next 5 years. We're seeing graduates, especially in the West, graduating in so much debt, and yet there's no work for them because a lot of the bigger employers are no longer taking on graduates because they're not graduating university with the right skills. And it's like, well, how can we begin to bridge that gap? We're seeing financing in the US, in the UK, actually globally, financing towards education is getting a lot more expensive for you to actually get a degree. And people are questioning, well, do I need this degree? Maybe if I'm going to a Harvard or a Cambridge or something like that, yes, there is value. There's that intrinsic value through the network of attending one of these establishments. But for a lot of other people, and what we saw in COVID, is that actually there's a lot of information out there that's readily available for people to learn, yet we're not capturing this learning. So one of the core aspects that we've worked on as a operating system, if you like, one of the first layers of that solution has been verifiable credentials. How can we showcase that someone has a skill and showcase that on chain? Now, what does on chain means? It means that it's uploaded in a way that it cannot be tampered with. For those who are not familiar with what blockchain technology is, one of the beauties of blockchain technology is once information has been uploaded, you cannot tamper with that information. It's set in stone, it's set in a block, and every few minutes you have a new block, hence the term blockchain, and that data is immutable, which is the word that I was getting towards. So we have our verifiable credentials. What we also did, and I think this is super important, in 2022, we acquired an educational technology startup called TinyTap. And they had a very interesting business model. They had a no-code solution for teachers to create gamified content. You'd have parents and schools paying subscription fees, and then they'd share some of the revenues with the teachers. This was a traditional edtech platform. We acquired them over the course of 2022 because we saw that they had a flywheel where they were rewarding the teachers, they were rewarding the content creators there. And what we did was we looked at the top grossing courses, if you like, within their ecosystem, and we decided to tokenize it. But back then there was very limited legal framework around how can you tokenize something in a compliant manner, especially when the SEC was deeming everything a security back then.
Exactly
So
right.
100%. So actually, we found quite an innovative solution through music and through co-publishing.
Yeah.
So an investor coming in would come in as a co-publisher, and what they were buying were 80% of the future revenue that would be generated by this course. We ended up packaging 12 of these courses into NFTs, which we called publisher NFTs. We sold these NFTs. We raised over, this was November and December of 2022. We raised over $400,000. And half of that went to the teachers. So you had an elementary school teacher in the US walking away with over $36,000. That was more than her yearly salary. And
Yes.
that for us was the proof of concept for Open Campus. Can we find a way to bridge the gap between educators and between the technology in a way that can actually empower educators? And we did that. And then by May of 2023, we launched EDU token, which is our governance token that powers the Open Campus ecosystem. Maybe I'll take a pause there, and then we can jump in again.
Yeah,
after.
no, I'm loving all this, because as we talked, and for those that have listened to my conversations over the years, I wear multiple hats. So I'm in law, but I'm also in education as well as being an entrepreneur. So the idea that, teachers, many of them have side gigs or side jobs, but this is a way that they can earn and still create and still support the students that they want to support, and in a way that doesn't detract from what their primary, some of the individuals' primary purposes are. So I love that. Are you how are you, I guess my question, there's a few, because you talked about the EDU token, and you also talked about the residual to the teachers. I'm assuming that this is global for anyone who's watching, or are you doing this in only certain regions of the world right now?
I think great question. So when we launched, TinyTap was one of our main partners when we launched with Open Campus. The biggest challenge we had was distribution, because TinyTap focused on your age range of 4 to 11, 4 to 12 years old, which was great if we were targeting students of that age, but when you're in the Web3 space, they tend to join from 13 onwards. So we just missed our target audience
Yeah.
from that perspective. But launching as a DAO, and for those who are not familiar with DAOs, the DAO, the Decentralized Autonomous Organization. Now, we can forget all of the fancy fluff. All it actually means is a technology that allows a group of people, hence the decentralized aspect, who can be anywhere in the world, to govern a treasury or a pot of money in a way that creates trust in a trustless environment. And that's fundamentally one way to interpret what a DAO is. The reason we launched as a DAO is because education is such a big beast that we know it's not something we can change on our own, and we need partners. So TinyTap was one of the first partners. When we launched, actually in the token launched, we put a proposal forward, or we had the partner put a proposal forward to the DAO, asking for $10 million to create a global educator fund. And the purpose of this was to incentivize teachers. And we have over 90 million certified or registered teachers worldwide. Like, teachers are the largest qualified content creator set that exists out there. So the fact that we don't have a platform where teachers can monetize in a universal way as of today, you can argue YouTube is that. I can argue otherwise. But maybe that's a discussion for a different day.
Yes.
So we went ahead with that as an incentive for teachers to create content, but we faced two issues. Number one, the audience that we had access to were not really teachers, to be completely honest. And number two, a lot of the people that were educators, the content they were creating was not fit for distribution in TinyTap because of, again, the difference in age ranges.
Yes.
So what we actually then did is we put another proposal forward to the DAO to change the conditions of that $10 million. And we turned it into an accelerator. So we partnered with New Campus, which was one of our first big partners to come in. Again, they're within the education space, have been for many years, and they were running an accelerator. So we partnered together to run an accelerator to onboard the next 100, if you like, or that was the aim, at least when we started, edtech companies to be leveraging and to become partners within the Open Campus ecosystem. We've run 10 cohorts and we've funded over 60 projects since that's begun, which has really given us a lot more distribution that's out there. But I think what's been super interesting is through that and running multiple hackathons. And again, off air, we spoke about the importance of hackathons and the importance of people actually doing. Through that, we have two of the largest developer bridges. And what I mean by that is two of the largest outfits that take developers from the traditional sense and train them up into Web3, have been leveraging our tech stack for credentialing, for example, to showcase that this person has gone through this education and now they can code in Rust, they can code in Solidity, they can code in the different smart contract languages that are needed for blockchain and for Web3. And then they're being hired by different projects and businesses that need developers to build. So we've seen that be quite an interesting one. But what we also saw come through one of our hackathons was a student loan platform focused in the Philippines. And something I haven't spoken about, but was a worldwide first for us. Not just for us, just no one's done this before, is we managed to bring $1 million of student financing on chain.
Wow.
And absolutely. And one of the biggest challenges that the education space has is that there is the access to education financing really is a lottery depending on where you're born. I
Yes.
was lucky enough to be born in the UK, so I had access to financing for education if I chose to take that financing. If I was born in an obscure part of the world, I would not have that as an option. So what we saw in the Philippines were that parents were taking loans from loan sharks at a
Yes.
40% APR plus, which is
Yes.
insane. And
Yes.
again, we've all seen enough Netflix series and about about loan sharks and how aggressive they can be. So through the hackathon, we had Pencil Finance came out, which we incubated, and actually, like I said, we've brought on $1 million of student loans on chain. This is a short-term loan over the course of 12 months, and
Yeah.
we've had a 100% repayment rate as of now. And I think that the APR that's being charged for the parents is at 15 or 16%. So there is night and day difference. In an ideal world, we want to democratize access to education for everyone and make it free and figure out different flywheels in terms of how we can do that. But to the point of us being a DAO, we spoke about verifiable credentials. We've spoken about partnerships, and partnerships are super important to us. This hasn't been announced yet, but I'm hoping it will be announced by the time this is aired. But there are some big partnership news coming out of Vietnam and India for us as well in terms of distribution. What we've really seen is actually in emerging or developing economies. That's where we've seen a real appetite for different solutions towards education. And for us, it's again coming back to this operating system analogy. We have the credentialing, we have the financing, we also have, through some of the projects that have come through the accelerator, we have your Web3 LinkedIn, if you like, to really help bridge the gap between employers and people trying to find work, again, leveraging our credentialing. So that there's a lot brewing. But for anyone listening at home, if you are in the education space or are connected with someone in the education space and any of what I'm saying is resonating with you, then please do reach out. You can go to the website or info@opencampus.xyz. Again, we're always looking for partners. The reason, again, why we've launched the DAO is that it allows us to scale with the right partners in mind. We do have a treasury. So what that means is we do have a sum of money that if you hold our token, you're able to make proposals to the DAO to ask for funding as well. So there's different ways we can partner and work together. But I'll stop the selling as of now and back to you again.
No, I appreciate that. So also if you're an educator and you're not quite sure even how what you know can be applied in a new tech Web3, and Web3 is not new. Actually, blockchain's been around for about 34 years now. For those that don't know Dr. Scott Stornetta and Dr. Haber, take a look or go back to some of my interviews of them. But if you're not sure where and how to apply your skill set into this, definitely reach out, ask questions, because we need you as educators to learn about the tech. You don't have to be tech savvy and knowledgeable, but just understand how do you put it together in a mosaic, and what can then be applied to go the next step for the students that we're all trying to serve. So, if someone does want to get involved, how do you onboard someone? What are the steps involved, especially if they're new to this? Obviously, even for those of us, that have been around for 10 years, people might have an interest. So what is how does the onboarding process go?
It's a great question. It really depends on what the underlying skill set of that person is. If they're a developer, then we have the onboarding process there. If they're a teacher, a slightly different onboarding process. I think the core focus for us when we realized that there was a big gap between what's happening in Web3 and what's happening in the real world, we focused on building in Web3 just to solidify through the partnerships and the foundations that we have, which is why we focus more on developers, on businesses that are focused on Web3. But over the course of this year, we've actually started to expand into the traditional sense. Oh, sorry, into traditional partners, because we have the technology at a point now, as I was saying earlier, where we can actually integrate and they can adopt different forms. So I think over the course of next year, really what I want one of our focuses to be, and actually have an offsite in January just for us to regroup as a team as well. And one thing I'm going to be pushing for is how can we educate the educators, to the point that you were making. Financial literacy, and this is something that's, I know it's big for you, it's big for me as well. We cannot expect people to change their attitude towards money if they do not understand how money works. We have a number of different financial literacy courses through our partners. So Mogaland Academy is one I'd highly recommend. They have a very interesting model where they create the different content, but they're also partnering with different, how can I put it, projects of a different nature. And an example is they've partnered with Producers, which is a music-based project or music-based business, to create financial literacy courses for musicians, so they can also understand what ownership of their assets actually means and how they can monetize based off of their rights and ownership around that, but also basic financial literacy as well. So there might be some interesting overlaps there, that if you're listening in and financial literacy is something important to you, but you might be in gaming, you might be in sports, you might be in music. We have different partners who can curate the right kind of education materials, if you like, or lessons, to be able to then take and distribute. So I think if you're a teacher listening in, I'd have a look at our ecosystem page. If you do visit the website, have a look at our ecosystem page. Some of it will make no sense if you're not in Web3, so apologies for that in advance, but some of it will make sense. And I think that's one of the biggest challenges for us, is that our audience base is so diverse that it's very difficult to have a single storyline that can resonate with everyone, but also education that resonates with everyone, because people coming in from Web3 want slightly different education to someone coming in from an education background or from Web2.
Well, the way that I usually frame it when I'm kind of doing my various workshops and things is like, and being in the education space, what I teach to a kindergartner is not what I would teach to a fifth grader. So there has to be a foundation that's laid, and you teach the alphabet, and then later you teach, how sentences are structured, and then the meaning of the sentences. So, even like with the hackathon that BLI did, the BLI Legal Tech Hackathon, I'm maybe at a fifth grade level of vocabulary, but the developers who were in the hackathon, they're at graduate school level because they're already coding, they're doing this. And I have a GitHub, but I don't understand it. But I can look at everything else, and my developers were telling me, okay, now you need to look at this. This is folder, you need this. And so even as an educator myself, we're always learning. We're lifelong learners, and that helps us with the students, because the struggle that we have resonates with them because they have a struggle too. So, it's okay if we don't know everything, and that's, I think, why I'm really excited about the projects that you've been talking about, because it's going to allow transition from Web 2 to Web 3. It's going to create the pipeline that you talked about that is so needed, because if we're asking Web 2 companies to go to Web 3, they need to hire people that are developers, but they also need to hire people that can critically think and look at where the holes. Is there a cybersecurity problem here? Because otherwise hacks will happen, and we already know a lot of things are going on online. So we need individuals that can look at things and think through and ask questions, because sometimes it takes a team to actually see that there's a challenge. So really appreciate everything that you're sharing. Any last minute thoughts on the projects that you've been involved with, or any things that are going to be happening in 2026, even though obviously you're always welcome to hop back on and give us updates, but anything that people need to be thinking about or need to know?
I mean, one big piece of news that we announced last week, 10 days ago, I believe, is that we're a NASDAQ listed company, ANPA.
Yes.
Yeah, they've acquired, or they've signaled the intent to acquire $3 million worth of EDU tokens, with that rising to up to $50 million in the next 2 years. And again, coming back to partnerships, that this is a perfect use case of why we have a token to begin with, because it allows us to partner not just with other businesses and projects in the blockchain space, but also with institutions now. And given, I guess, the Genius Act, just given Trump coming into power in the US, there's a much bigger appetite for crypto. Again, that's something we've seen over the course of this year. So for us, this was a big validation of what we've been building when a Nasdaq listed company wants to partner and then wants to acquire a large sum of tokens as well. So that's massive for us. And I'd be on the lookout for a couple more similar announcements over the next couple of months as well. And maybe I've said too much, I'm going to be told off by our PR team, but maybe not.
Well, we can always edit that, but for those that are listening, definitely, the information will be in the blog below. So that way, if you would like to hop on and over and explore and partner, you'll be able to do that. And also, definitely, if you are listening to this on any of the socials that I post, like and subscribe, but also hop back over to the Blockchain Legal Institute, because I'm sure that we're going to do a press release to talk about the need for this in education. And so our conversation will be embedded in there as well. So that way you'll see more links and any updates, because we'll be able to update. So thank you so much for being on. Really an honor to make your acquaintance and to know more about the projects that you're involved with. These are life-changing projects, because you never know which child, which student, anywhere in the world that you might be reaching as a result of the information that you're sharing and what they're going to create that will then impact the world. So, we are sometimes limited in our thinking, oh, well, my imagination can only think this, but a child, they see things with such awe. So there's nothing that's not possible. So I really appreciate what you're doing, because you're helping the educators that are helping the next generation. So thank you so much. So everyone, have a great day, and we will talk with you soon.